The scripture reading this morning will be John chapter 21, verses 15 through 17. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Feed my lambs." He said to him a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep."
Have you ever been walking down the road or driving in your car with the window down and you got a smell of something that reminded you of your past? It's amazing how our brain works, isn't it? That it can take the sense of a smell and it can take you back to a time in your past. See, when Jessica and I lived in Haiti, there were all kinds of smells. Some good smells, some not so good smells, but one of the prevailing smells was that of charcoal. And that's because everybody cooked with charcoal. So there was always a charcoal fire somewhere close. And so today, when I get a whiff of a charcoal fire, sometimes it brings me back to my time in Haiti. Sometimes the smell is so strong that I can immediately remember an exact time, an exact place. I can remember the people I was talking to and the conversations that I had. Have you ever had this experience? Well, what's the smell for you that brings you back to a time in your past? I wanted to start this morning by reminding you or talking to you about the sense of smell, specifically the smell of a charcoal fire, because our text for this morning is going to be bookended by two charcoal fires. And the story of surrounding these fires is told from John in his gospel. Now, if you read the Gospel of John and you get to the end of his gospel, you look at verses 30 and 31 of chapter 20, you would think that he should be done with what he has to say, because he tells us here exactly why he just wrote the things that he wrote. He tells us that he wrote these things so that we could believe in Jesus and have life in his name. But thankfully, he doesn't stop there. And he gives us one final encounter with Jesus. Now, the events surrounding this charcoal fire actually don't begin there at the end of John, but it actually begins all the way back in John chapter 13. And Jesus here, he's sharing with his disciples that he is about to leave them. And he tells them, not only am I about to leave you, but he says, where I'm going, you can't go with me. And so this, as you can imagine, it upset the disciples. But it specifically upset Peter. Peter, as he often did, he got very vocal about this. And he says, no, Jesus. He insists loudly and emphatically that he is going to remain loyal to Jesus, and he is going to follow him wherever he goes. He says, I'm going to follow you if it's the prison, if it's death, wherever, I'm coming with you. And he says, I'm even willing to lay down my life for you. But you see, after this bold statement from Peter, unfortunately for Peter, Jesus tells him that that's not going to be the case. He says, unfortunately, Peter, not only are you not going to follow me where I'm going, but you're about to deny me. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. You see, the story unfolds, continues on in chapter 18. And we see Jesus, he's being betrayed by Judas in the garden, and a band of soldiers come to take Jesus. And at this point, Peter, he's trying to live up to what he just told Jesus. He's trying to tell him, yes, I am going to stand up for you. And so he grabs his sword, and what does he do? He starts waving it around, and he cuts the ear off of one of the high priest's servants. This, unfortunately, is the bravest that Peter is going to get in this story. You see, once Peter was arrested, he continued to kind of follow Jesus, but it was at a distance. He followed Jesus at a distance, and while Jesus was being questioned by his accusers, Peter finds himself around the first charcoal fire. You see, Peter followed Jesus, but unfortunately, next to this fire, things are about to go horribly wrong for Peter. You see, Peter is asked by a servant girl, he's asked, do you belong to that man who's being questioned over there by the high priest? And what does Peter say? He says, no, I'm not. At this point, can you imagine what Peter's going through? Can you imagine the thoughts and the emotions that have to be going through Peter's mind? I imagine that he is probably cold, he is probably tired, he's probably hungry, and his heart is probably about to beat out of his chest for what just happened a few moments ago in the garden. I imagine that Peter desperately wants to tell these people that, yes, I'm a follower of Jesus. Yes, that's my rabbi. But he understands and he knows that if the guards recognize him and they realize that he was in the garden and he was actually the one waving his sword around, cutting people's ears off, that he's probably going to be standing right next to Jesus. Now, instead of leaving the crowd before things get worse, unfortunately for Peter, he denies Jesus 2 more times, just like Jesus said he would. Now, if Peter didn't feel bad about the first denial and the second denial, can you imagine what Peter must have felt on that third denial when he denied Jesus that third time? Can you imagine what he must have felt when he heard the rooster crow, just like Jesus told him was going to happen? But if you look in Luke's account of this story, not only did the rooster crow, but on that third denial, when he denied Jesus the third time, it tells us that Jesus and Peter made eye contact. Can you imagine? You just denied your rabbi, your teacher, for the third time, just like he told you you're going to do, and you look over and he's looking you straight in the face, in the eye. Can you imagine what Peter is feeling? The text tells us that Peter did exactly what probably any of us would do. The text tells us that Peter was so ashamed that he went away and wept bitterly. You see, this had to have been the lowest point in Peter's life. But now if we fast forward a few days in this encounter here, we see that unfortunately Jesus died on the cross. But the good news is that he was buried and he was raised, and now he is alive again. And so at this point in the story, Jesus has met a couple times with his disciples and his followers, but he finds himself next to a charcoal fire, eating breakfast with his disciples. Now, do you remember the smell of whatever it is that caused you to remind you of your past? Well, see, I believe right here that Peter is about to be reminded about what he did. I don't think it's a coincidence that this story begins with the charcoal fire and ends with a charcoal fire. You see, just a few days after Peter left that first charcoal fire, he left it in shame. He finds himself eating with Jesus next to another fire. You see, the smell of that charcoal fire had to have called up in memory what he did. But not only did it recall the memory for Peter, but I imagine it recalled the events for Jesus. So as they sit together, eating a meal together at breakfast, can you feel the tension? Can you feel the tension in the air? Peter knows that he needs to have a conversation with Jesus about what just took place. He knows it. He knows that a conversation is coming. I imagine once again that Peter's heart's about to pound out of his chest as he anxiously waits a conversation with his rabbi, with his teacher. Obviously, we weren't there. We don't know exactly what Peter was feeling, but I kind of think it might have been something like this. Have you ever, when you were a child, none of y'all probably ever got in trouble, right? So maybe this doesn't apply to you, but it definitely applies to me. Did you ever get in trouble and your parents sent you to your room? And your parents sent you to your room and they said, I want you to go to your room and I want you to think about what you just did. And then I'm going to come in later and we're going to deal with the situation, right? Just me? Yeah, you know, when your parents send you to that room, the longer they make you wait, what happens? The more anxious you get, right? You're just like, I wish they would come in here, man, and get this over with. But Peter, he knows it's coming. Let's now pick up the story in John chapter 21, starting in verse 15, and let's see how this conversation plays out. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, Feed my lambs. He said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, Tend my sheep. But he said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter, at this point, he's grieved because he said to him a third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know that I love you. You know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him then, feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. This he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, Follow me. Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following him, the one who also had leaned back against him during the supper and had said, Lord, who is it that is going to betray you? You see, as indicated by verse 20, it seems that Jesus and Peter on this occasion have kind of got up from that fire, and they've gone off by themselves. And so I kind of envision here that Peter and Jesus, they're just walking along the shoreline, not saying a whole lot. And then Jesus just simply asked Peter, Peter, do you love me? You see, with that simple question, Jesus exposes the sin of Peter and opens up the wound and hurt that he was holding on to. With those 4 words, Jesus was bringing up the painful subject of Peter's boasting before the arrest of Jesus and his terrible denial around that first charcoal fire. 3 times Jesus asked Peter if he loves him. Maybe it was to give him an opportunity to confess his love for Jesus the same amount of times that he denied him earlier. Now, I'm not one that likes to bore people with Greek and Hebrew words, but in this story, I think it's necessary that we look at a few words to fully understand what's going on in this story. You see, when Jesus asked Peter if he loved him the first time and the second time, Jesus says to him, Peter, do you agape me? Which means, Peter, do you love me with all of your heart? See, agape is the highest form of love that you can have for someone, specifically for God. But both times when Jesus asked that question, Peter responded with a different type of love. He said, yes, Lord, I phileo you. Well, we know what phileo means, right? Phileo is brotherly love, or a friendship kind of love. So what we see here is that Jesus asked Peter if he loves him with all of his heart, and Peter responds, yeah, Lord, I love you as a friend. But see, what's interesting about this story is when we get to the 3rd time when Jesus asked the question, he changes his question. It's no longer, Peter, do you love me with all of your heart? Do you agape me? But he changes the question and says, Peter, do you phileo me? Peter, do you love me as a friend? Instead of saying, Peter, do you agape me? He says, okay, Peter, do you phileo me? You see, agape is the highest form of love, but Jesus on this third question was telling Peter that God could accept his phileo love, which was all that Peter apparently could muster at the time. You see, Peter's love for Jesus, it was far from perfect, but at least it was genuine. So here's the beauty of what is going on here, I believe, in this text. Just like Jesus was able to take Peter where he was at when it came to his love and devotion for him, Jesus is able, and he desperately wants to take you and me where we are at in our love for him. See, here's the thing. Don't ever think that you have done too much wrong, that you have to get to a certain point in your devotion or your love for God before he will accept you. If you are someone who believes in Jesus, and you're someone who believes and understands that he died for you, then no matter where you're at, Jesus says, I want to have a relationship with you. just like he did with Peter, he is able to forgive us. He is able to forgive you and take you from a phileo kind of love to an agape form of love. You see, Peter on this occasion, he had a phileo kind of love for Jesus. All he had at this point in his life was just a friendship kind of love for Jesus. But by the time his life is over, as we're going to see here in just a minute, boy, did Peter have an agape kind of love for Jesus. As one preacher that I heard said one time, he said, just like Peter, if you stay with Jesus and follow Jesus long enough, He will move you from affection to devotion. He will move you from an emotional attachment to Jesus to a devotion of Jesus that will cause you to follow Him and feed His sheep, just like Peter did. Now, there's one more aspect of the story that I think is important that we don't overlook. You know, oftentimes I think for us that are Christians who have accepted Jesus, we have been forgiven and we understand and believe that we've been forgiven. But for some reason, sometimes we carry within us guilt of things that we have done in our past, and it causes us to at least think to ourselves that we're not good enough to serve God like we once did. Sometimes people maybe don't feel, because of something that they've done in their past, that they can't serve in the church the way that they once did. Well, see, here in this encounter with Peter and Jesus, each time Peter responds to Jesus and tells him that he loves him as a friend, Jesus responds with a command. He responds with a reminder of the commission that He's already given him and the commission that He's given to each and every one of us. Every time that Peter responds with, "Yes, Lord, I do love you," Jesus says, "Okay then, feed my sheep." Each time Peter tells Jesus that he loves him, Jesus then says, "Feed my sheep." Jesus, what He's doing, He's telling Peter and He's telling us that no matter what you have done in your past, you need to understand that you are forgiven. He says, I need you to put the past in the past, and from this moment on, you need to understand and believe that you are forgiven, and I need you to get back to work feeding my sheep. Church, here's the deal. Don't ever let the things that you have done in your past keep you from serving God in the present. Don't ever let things you have done in your past keep you from serving God in the present. Peter didn't, and neither should we. See, when we look at the life of Peter, he became, after this point in his life, one of the lowest points in his life, he became one of the most prominent figures in the Lord's church. You see, he was the one that not too long after this, when he just had a phileo kind of love for Jesus, he loved Jesus as a friend, just a few days later, he was the man who had such a devotion and love for Jesus that he was willing to stand up to that crowd of thousands of people and tell them that they just murdered the Son of God, knowing good and well that those people could turn on him and kill him too. See, Peter went from a phileo kind of love to an agape form of love And he didn't let his past hold him back. And neither should we. Let's be people that when we mess up, let's be people who focus on what we can do for Jesus now, in the present, rather than what we failed to do for Him in the past. This morning, you may be at a place in your life where you can relate to Peter. You have those same feelings that Peter had around those charcoal fires. Please know that Jesus is waiting to forgive you, just like He forgave Peter. Also, for those of us who have been forgiven, but yet we've maybe have fallen short, we've messed up, let's be people who understand and believe that we have been forgiven, and don't let our past failings keep us from serving God the way He wants us to. Let's be people who move forward and feed His sheep. This morning, if we can help you with either of these, the invitation is yours. If you need to come forward, we're going to sing an invitation song. You're welcome to come forward and seek help. If you need to learn more about what you need to do in order to receive forgiveness, in order to be reconciled back to God, just like Peter was, we would love to help you with that. If you don't want to come down forward, talk to the person next to you, or seek out one of our leaders for help. But if you're here this morning and you are a Christian, but you haven't been serving God the way He wants you to, because you're ashamed of maybe something in your past and it's holding you back, put the past in the past. And let's be people who focus on the present. That we are a redeemed people, that we've been forgiven, and that God needs each and every one of us to feed His sheep. If we can help you with either of these two things this morning, you're welcome to come forward if that's what you need to do as we stand and as we sing the invitation song.